The city of Gira shone under the pale light of 3 moons. Its towers twisted like glass spires, and bridges stretched across the sky like ribbons of silver. The streets were filled with alien creatures of every shape and color. Some had scales, some had feathers, and some seemed to shimmer like liquid light. All of them whispered and stared, their voices mixing into a strange symphony of curiosity and awe. Today was not an ordinary day. Today, a human groom would arrive. Kale, the human, stood at the edge of the city plaza. He was tall, with broad shoulders and hands calloused from years of work. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his simple robe contrasted sharply with the elaborate garments of the aliens. He did not speak. He did not smile. Yet even in silence, he drew attention. There was something in the way he held himself, a quiet strength, a calm certainty, that made the crowds pause and watch. Some of the younger aliens whispered among themselves, clearly confused. "Why doesn't he speak?" One asked. "Is he afraid?" Another answered. But others felt a different impression. There was power in his silence. Princess Lyra approached, her movement graceful and almost unreal. She was the crown jewel of her planet, with flowing hair like molten silver and eyes the color of liquid emerald. Every step she took seemed to make the air itself shimmer. She was smiling politely at the humans and aliens gathered. But her eyes kept finding Kale. There was something in him that unsettled her, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made her feel safe and curious all at once. The Council of Elders, towering and regal, waited at the ceremonial platform. They were proud, ancient beings who had seen countless species rise and fall, yet they could not hide their doubt. A human, small and seemingly ordinary, stood before them as the chosen groom. Some exchanged glances, some raised thin, tentacle-like eyebrows, and some simply frowned. They whispered among themselves, discussing whether humans were capable of the honor and responsibility of this union. Kale stepped forward. Every footfall echoed on the marble plaza. The aliens flinched, not because he was threatening, but because he moved with purpose. He approached Lyra and bowed. It was not a showy bow, not a gesture meant to impress, but one of respect and calm assurance. The princess returned the gesture, a soft smile on her face. The silence between them was comfortable, as if words were unnecessary. They understood each other in a way that transcended language. The city was alive with anticipation. Merchants had stopped selling, children had stopped playing, and even the birds of light, delicate creatures that flew in swirls above the towers hovered in the sky, watching. Kale took his place beside Lyra. The aliens whispered again. "He is too quiet. How can he be worthy? Perhaps humans have a hidden strength. Or perhaps he does not understand our ways." But Kale's eyes were steady. They held no fear, no arrogance, only resolve. As the sun of Gira began to dip behind the mountains, the light caught Kale's sword, sheathed at his side. It was simple in design, yet something about it seemed different. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, as if alive. Some in the crowd noticed it and stopped talking, sensing that this human was not as ordinary as he seemed. Others thought it was just a trick of the light. But Lyra, standing close to him, felt a shiver run down her spine. The ceremonial drum sounded once, deep and resonant, marking the beginning of the ritual. Aliens raised their voices in a chant, a melody meant to honor the union and ward off misfortune. Kale did not move, did not react. His silence became a statement, louder than any chant. In that quiet stillness, he drew all eyes and hearts toward him. For the first time, some of the council members doubted their own assumptions. This human so still, so quiet, might carry a power they could not yet understand, and in that moment, as the moons rose higher, Kale and Lyra stood side by side, two beings from different worlds. The crowd was silent in anticipation, unaware that this was the calm before a storm that would shake the city, challenge the galaxy, and reveal a strength no one had expected. The calm of the ceremony shattered like glass. A thunderous roar echoed through the city as shadows darkened the plaza. High above, the sky trembled, and a massive warship descended from the stars. It was black, jagged, and alive with menace, its engines burning blue fire that painted the towers below in an eerie glow. The aliens gasped, their whispers turning into frightened screams. Even the council elders stiffened, sensing the presence of a force that had long been feared across the galaxy. From the warship's hatch emerged the Marok, a brutal race known for conquest and terror. Their leader, Karak, was monstrous, towering over most aliens with horned shoulders and eyes like molten metal. He stomped onto the plaza, sending tremors through the marble floor. "Princess Lyra," he bellowed, his voice deep enough to shake hearts. "You belong to me now. Surrender, or watch your precious city burn." Chaos erupted. Aliens fled, citizens screamed, and guards scrambled to form a defensive line. Lyra's attendants tried to shield her, but she stood frozen. Her emerald eyes fixed on Kale. He remained silent, still and steady, as though the Morax's threats were nothing more than the wind brushing past him. In that silence, Lyra found a strange sense of comfort. She had expected a human to be weak, fearful, or cowardly, but this quiet human stood taller than anyone. Korak snarled, taking a step forward, his massive claw raised. Sparks flew from the plaza as his sheer weight pressed the ground. "Step aside, human," he growled, "or be crushed like an insect." The council shouted, urging Kale to retreat, to let the aliens handle the intruders. But Kale did not move backward. Not an inch. He simply let his gaze meet Korak's, calm, unwavering, and strangely commanding. The Marok soldiers laughed, circling Kale. They expected fear, trembling, or begging. Humans, they had heard, were fragile creatures, weak in body and spirit. Yet Kale did not flinch. His hands rested lightly on the hilt of his sword, but he did not draw it. Instead, he breathed slowly, his silent confidence radiating outward like an invisible shield. Whispers ran through the crowd. Some aliens leaned forward, curious. "What is he waiting for?" One asked. "He is not afraid. Why?" Korak's anger flared. He lunged, swinging his massive claw at Kale with terrifying speed. The ground shook where he landed. The aliens gasped, expecting Kale to be crushed in an instant. But Kale moved with the precision of a flowing river. In a single swift motion, he sidestepped and drew his sword. It glimmered, not just with metal, but with an energy that seemed alive, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The Marok froze, sensing that this human's weapon was no ordinary blade. Kale did not shout. He did not taunt. He only raised the sword in a slow, deliberate arc. The air around it shimmered, bending light in ways the aliens had never seen. A wave of energy pulsed outward, knocking Korak's soldiers off balance. Screams filled the plaza as Marok troops stumbled and fell. Even the council elders whispered in astonishment. A human. A single human. Controlling such power? Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She had heard stories of human courage, but seeing it, feeling it, was unlike anything she had imagined. She reached for Kale's hand, finding him steady and unshaken. In that small gesture, she realized something profound. This human was more than a groom. He was a shield, a force, a storm contained within a calm exterior. Korak roared, fury burning brighter than before. He raised his claw again, ready to strike with full force. Kale's sword gleamed in response, humming faintly as if alive. The plaza fell silent, the crowd holding its breath. Two beings faced each other, the monstrous general and the silent human, and for the first time, all who watched felt a chill of recognition. Something extraordinary was about to unfold, and the galaxy itself seemed to pause in anticipation. Kale's grip on his sword was firm, but relaxed. The blade glowed softly, almost as if it recognized the threat and wanted to respond. The air around him hummed, carrying an energy that made the Marok soldiers pause. Even Korak, fierce and fearless, narrowed his molten metal eyes. He had never seen a weapon behave like this, and he did not like it. Kale took a single step forward. Nothing more. Yet that step seemed to carry the weight of the entire human species, a quiet declaration that they would not be bowed or broken. The aliens around the plaza instinctively stepped back, sensing something they could not explain. The city itself seemed to lean forward, the towers reflecting the sword's light, casting a soft shimmer across the crowd. Without warning, Kale swung his sword in a slow arc. The motion was graceful, almost casual, yet it released a wave of energy so powerful that the nearest Marok soldiers were thrown off their feet. They scrambled, claws flailing, unable to comprehend what had happened. The council gasped. "Is this possible?" One elder whispered, clutching his staff. Humans were supposed to be fragile, weak. Yet here stood one human, silent and composed, controlling a power beyond imagination. Korak's fury erupted. He charged, each step causing the marble to crack beneath him. Kale met him head-on, moving like water, flowing around the Marayak's brute strength. Every swing of Kale's sword released controlled bursts of energy, knocking back the attackers without harming the city. The crowd stared in disbelief, unable to look away. The humans had always been underestimated, but now that belief was crumbling like dust. Lyra's heart pounded. She had expected a fight, but she had not expected this. Kale's movements were precise, each strike purposeful. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. Every Marak attack he met only highlighted the skill of his swordplay. And yet, he remained silent. Not once did he shout or taunt. His calmness amplified the impact of every strike. His silence had become louder than the roars of the Marak. A Marak soldier tried to flank him, leaping from the rooftops, claws extended to strike. Kale twisted mid-step, the sword slicing the air with a faint hiss. The blade's energy formed a shimmering barrier that deflected the attack with a force that rattled the plaza's stones. The crowd gasped again, murmuring in awe. Aliens who had once doubted humans now whispered in reverence. Even the timid children leaned forward, captivated. Kale's eyes met Lyra's briefly. She saw not fear, but determination. Not anger, but clarity. This human was a living storm, and yet he moved with the serenity of a calm lake. Her hand itched to reach for him, but she stayed, trusting him completely. The sword pulsed again, brighter now, as if feeding off his resolve. It was no ordinary weapon, it was a manifestation of human will, a force the aliens could barely comprehend. Korak roared, swinging his claw with all his strength, but Kale's sword moved faster. With one precise strike, the general's momentum was halted, and the energy from the blade sent him stumbling back. Dust and rubble swirled around the plaza as the Marak retreated slightly, shocked by the sheer power of a single human. The council's whispers turned to exclamations of astonishment. The elders looked at each other in disbelief. A human, alone, capable of such might? Kale stood in the center of the plaza, the sword glowing, humming, alive. The aliens around him felt the weight of what was happening. This was not just a fight. This was a revelation. Humans, so often dismissed, were capable of unimaginable strength. Lyra's eyes filled with awe. She realized that her groom was no ordinary human. He was a force the galaxy had never seen, and in his silence, he had already begun to shake the world dot above them. The moons of Jira bathed the scene in silver light. Kale's sword shimmered like liquid fire, a symbol that even in stillness, a human could command the impossible. The Marak would learn, the city would survive, and the galaxy would remember this day. The silent groom had begun to reveal his true power, and it was only the beginning. The plaza had become a battlefield. Dust rose in swirling clouds as Kale stood facing Korak, the Marak general. The alien's eyes burned with anger and disbelief, while Kale's gaze remained calm and steady. The contrast was stark, one filled with fury, the other with quiet focus. Every alien watching felt the tension in their chest, unsure whether to cheer or hide. Korak lunged first, his clawed hand swinging with a force that could crush stone. The ground cracked beneath him, sending shards of marble flying. Kale moved like water. He did not panic, he did not hesitate. With one swift motion, he brought his sword down, releasing a pulse of energy that struck the Marak and sent him sliding back across the plaza. Dust kicked up, and the crowd gasped. They had expected resistance, perhaps even bravery, but not this. A single human could match a Marak warrior strike for strike. Korak roared in frustration, recovering quickly. He slammed the ground with both fists, calling forth shockwaves that rippled across the plaza. Buildings trembled. Aliens scrambled for cover. But Kale's sword shimmered, forming a protective barrier of light that absorbed the shock and reflected it back in small bursts. The humans in the crowd whispered stories of their ancestors, tales of resilience, of bravery against impossible odds. They realized Kale carried that legacy in every swing. The duel grew faster. Korak's attacks were wild and brutal, filled with raw strength, while Kale's movements were precise and deliberate. Each swing of the sword cut through the air with a hum that was almost musical, a sound of focus and power combined. Marak soldiers tried to flank him, to overwhelm him with numbers, but Kale's energy pulses threw them back again and again. The air itself seemed to bend around him, responding to his will. Lyra's eyes never left him. Her chest tightened with fear and awe. She had expected a groom who might be brave in small ways, perhaps clever with words, perhaps polite and courteous. But she had not expected a warrior whose presence alone commanded respect, whose silence was louder than any shout. She wanted to rush to him, to protect him, yet she knew she could not. Kale was not just defending himself, he was defending her, the city, and perhaps something far larger than any of them could understand. Korak's frustration grew with every failed strike. He called upon more of his soldiers, larger beasts, and strange machines designed to crush opposition. Yet Kale met each attack calmly, his sword glowing brighter with each strike, responding to his resolve. The crowd murmured in astonishment. They had never seen anything like this. A human, alone, standing as a living shield against chaos, bending the very battlefield to his will. The battle reached its peak as Korak launched a massive strike, intending to crush Kale in a single blow. The human did not flinch. Instead, he raised his sword and struck it downward with perfect timing. The energy released was immense, sending a shockwave that shattered the plaza around them and sent Korak flying. He landed heavily, snarling, his body covered in deep cuts from the energy bursts. The Marak paused, their confidence shaken. Kale did not move to celebrate. He stood steady, sword humming, eyes scanning for the next threat. His silence had become a voice speaking to every alien present that courage and resolve were not measured by size or ferocity, but by heart and focus. Lyra's chest swelled with pride. She understood now that this human was extraordinary, a force the galaxy had underestimated at its peril. The duel was far from over, but the first shock had passed. Kale had shown that even against a being of overwhelming power, a single human could hold the line. The plaza was scarred, the crowd shaken, yet hope had ignited. The silent Groom had proven his worth, and for the first time, even the Marak wondered if they had underestimated humanity, and in that moment, beneath the 3 moons of Jira, the world itself seemed to pause, waiting to see what the silent human would do next. The Marak horde had assumed they could crush the city easily. But Kale's calm, unwavering presence changed everything. Each step he took radiated a strange force, invisible yet palpable, that seemed to strengthen the defenders and weaken the invaders. The plaza, once a place of ceremony, had become the epicenter of something extraordinary. Korak roared again, summoning more creatures from the worship, massive beasts with armored hides and claws that could rend stone. They charged like living storms, shaking the ground with every step. The aliens around the plaza trembled, some clutching their loved ones, others frozen in disbelief. Kale did not flinch. He drew a deep breath, his hand steady on his sword, and waited. He did not need to run or hide. The energy of his resolve seemed to flow into the weapon, making it shine brighter, alive with a force the Marak could not understand. With a swift motion, Kale swung the sword. It cut through the air like liquid fire, releasing a wave of energy that collided with the charging beasts. They crashed into one another, roaring in confusion, their momentum broken. Dust and debris swirled around the plaza, yet Kale stood firm, unharmed, his eyes calm as if he had already predicted every move. The crowd gasped, their fear transforming into awe. Aliens whispered among themselves. Could a single human really hold back an army? Lyra ran forward slightly, unable to contain her amazement. She saw the fear in the eyes of the Marak soldiers and the disbelief of the council. Kale's sword was no longer just a weapon, it was a symbol of human resilience, of focus and courage that could not be measured by size or numbers. She reached for his hand, and for the briefest moment, his eyes met hers. There was no fear there, only a promise that he would not fail, that he would protect her and the city at all costs. The Marak leader, Korak, bellowed, fury twisting his features. "No human can withstand me," he roared, charging directly at Kale with a roar that shook the plaza. But Kale did not back down. He waited, letting Korak close the distance. Then, with the precision of a master, Kale swung his sword in a wide arc. A shockwave burst from the blade, throwing Korak backward and slamming him into the plaza's stones. The alien general snarled, struggling to rise, but the crowd saw the first crack in his confidence. Encouraged by Kale's unwavering stance, the city's defenders began to rally. Aliens who had been paralyzed with fear now lifted their weapons and joined the fight. Even smaller human allies, hidden until now, came forward to aid Kale. It was as if the silent Groom had awakened a courage in everyone around him. The battle that had seemed impossible now felt winnable. The tides had turned, not by brute force alone, but by Kale's presence, his calm determination, and the sheer undeniable power of his sword. Korak called forth one last desperate wave of Marak reinforcements, massive beasts and armored warriors alike, hoping to overwhelm Kale before he could fully assert control. But Kale's sword pulsed brighter, glowing like a star. With a single sweeping motion, he unleashed energy in all directions. The shockwave tore through the ranks of the Marak, sending them flying, scattering their forces. Dust filled the air, and for a moment, the plaza fell silent except for the echoes of the defeated army. Kale lowered his sword slightly, but his eyes remained alert, scanning for any lingering threat. The humans and aliens around him could hardly believe what they had seen. One man whispered, Unstoppable. Lyra's chest heaved with relief and awe. She realized the truth. This human, her silent groom, was not just brave. He was extraordinary. He had turned the tide of battle with nothing but his calm courage, precise skill, and an unwavering heart. The Marok retreated, leaving the plaza scarred but intact. The city was safe, and the aliens who had doubted humans now bowed their heads in respect. Kale's silence had spoken louder than any speech could. He had shown that even against overwhelming odds, one human, steadfast and focused, could change the course of events. And in that moment, the crowd understood. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. And the silent groom had begun to reveal just how powerful they truly were. The plaza was a storm of dust, cracked marble, and the faint glow of Kale's sword. The Marok horde had retreated slightly, but Korak still stood, seething, his molten eyes fixed on the silent human who had just shattered his pride. Every alien and human present felt the tension in the air. The silence of Kale was no longer quiet, it was a force, a presence that demanded attention and respect. Korak roared, calling for another attack. His massive hands slammed the plaza, creating shockwaves that rattled the towers. He summoned beasts larger and fiercer than before, creatures whose claws could tear stone, whose jaws could crush armor. He expected Kale to falter. He expected the human to run, to break, to plead. But Kale did none of these things. He simply raised his sword. The blade shimmered, radiating an energy that seemed to flow from Kale himself. It was as if the sword had merged with his will, reflecting his calm, his courage, his unwavering determination. The air around him seemed to bend slightly, the dust settling in slow spirals. Aliens gasped. Some dropped to their knees, unable to comprehend the force before them. Even Lyra's attendants stared in awe, whispering among themselves that they had never seen anything like it. With a single step forward, Kale struck. The energy from his sword erupted outward like a silent explosion, slamming into the oncoming beasts and Marok soldiers. They were thrown back, tumbling across the plaza like ragdolls. Korak's eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible. He muttered, his voice trembling for the first time. Humans, one single human, could wield power that rivaled the fiercest of Marok warriors. Kale moved gracefully, each swing of his sword precise, almost artistic, yet deadly. The Marok forces tried to encircle him, but he was everywhere at once, his blade a blur of light and force. Each strike knocked attackers back without unnecessary bloodshed, showing a mastery beyond mere fighting. It was not anger or hatred driving him, it was focus, resolve, and the instinct to protect those who could not defend themselves. Lyra's chest heaved as she watched him. She had never imagined a human could be so powerful, so fearless, so perfect in their calm strength. Her fingers tightened around her robes, her mind racing. This was not the human she had expected, a timid, untested creature brought for a political union. This was a force of nature, silent yet unstoppable, and it filled her with a mixture of all love and a deep, unshakable trust. Korak, enraged, tried to strike again. His claws glowed with energy, his roar shaking the plaza. Yet Kale moved with a calm that made time seem slower, a serenity that amplified every strike. The sword hummed like a living thing, pulsing in response to Kale's focus. With one sweeping arc, he sent Korak sprawling to the ground, the alien general struggling to rise beneath the human's overwhelming presence. The crowd of aliens and humans fell silent. Not a whisper, not a murmur. They stared, realizing something they had never considered. Humans, underestimated for centuries, could wield a power beyond imagination. Kale had revealed it, not through shouts, not through anger, but through unshakable courage and the sheer brilliance of his skill. Lyra stepped closer, unable to resist. She reached for Kale's hand, trembling with emotion. He finally looked at her, his eyes calm and warm. No words were needed. In that glance, she understood everything, his power, his heart, his unwavering protection. She knew that as long as he stood, no threat could prevail. Korak staggered to his feet, defeated in spirit if not fully in body. His army faltered, broken not by numbers, but by the sheer force of one human's will. Kale's sword pulsed softly, a reminder that the storm had only just begun. The aliens, the humans, the city itself, none would ever forget this moment. The silent groom had shown the galaxy the true strength of humanity. And even in victory, his calm presence inspired awe, hope, and respect in every heart that witnessed it. The Marok warship slowly retreated, disappearing into the stars. Korak had been defeated, his pride shattered, and his army scattered. The city of Jera, once trembling with fear, now stood in awe of the silent human who had defended it alone. Dust settled over the plaza, reflecting the soft glow of Kale's sword, still pulsing with faint energy. He did not celebrate. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood, calm, steady, and unshakable. Lyra ran to him, her flowing silver hair catching the moonlight. She grasped his hand, her fingers trembling with relief and admiration. "Kale," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the remnants of the wind. "You've saved us all. You've changed everything." He looked at her and gave the slightest nod, a quiet acknowledgement. No words were needed. His silence had already spoken volumes, louder than any speech or proclamation. The crowd of aliens slowly approached, their expressions a mixture of awe, reverence, and disbelief. Many fell to their knees before Kale, not in submission, but in respect for a power and courage they had never imagined in a human. Even the council elders, who had doubted his worth at the beginning, now bowed their heads in recognition. "The human. He is more than we believed," one elder murmured, shaking his head. "He is a force the galaxy must honor." Children peeked from behind the crowd, eyes wide with wonder. Merchants who had stopped selling now whispered stories among themselves, already weaving tales of the silent human who had single-handedly defended the city. Even the city's animals and creatures, sensing the end of danger, emerged cautiously, circling the victorious figure as if acknowledging his power. Kale's presence was commanding, yet gentle, and the air around him seemed to carry hope itself. Princess Lyra pulled him aside as the crowd continued to marvel. "Kale, the Marok will never underestimate humans again. And neither will the galaxy," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Kale simply held her gaze, silent but resolute. He had not fought for glory, nor for recognition. He had fought because it was the right thing to do, because he could not let innocent lives be destroyed. And in doing so, he had revealed a truth the universe had long ignored. Humans were not weak, and they were not to be underestimated. Stories of the battle spread quickly. Across distant planets, aliens spoke in hushed tones of the human who stood silent against a monster, whose sword moved with the precision of destiny itself. Some feared humans now. Others admired them. And many wondered what other hidden strengths humanity might possess, powers yet unseen, courage yet untapped. Kale had shifted the balance, not with arrogance or anger, but with calm, unwavering resolve. As night deepened and the 3 moons shone brightly over Gyra, Kale finally allowed himself a small smile. Lyra squeezed his hand, understanding the depth of his sacrifice, the magnitude of his courage. The city would rebuild, the Marok would think twice before returning, and humanity's reputation would be forever changed. The silent Groom had not only saved the city, but had awakened a new respect for his entire species. Kale finally lowered his sword, the glow fading but the power remaining, hidden yet undeniable. He looked over the plaza, at the citizens, at the council, and at Lyra. They all understood without words that they had witnessed something extraordinary. A human had stood alone, fearless, unyielding, and had changed the course of history with courage and precision. The galaxy would remember this day for generations. In the quiet that followed, Kale finally spoke one word, soft but full of meaning: safe. The crowd fell silent, listening to the human who had been silent for so long. That single word carried the weight of his victory, his resolve, and his promise to protect. And as the moons reflected off the spires of Gyra, one truth was clear: the silent human Groom had become a legend, a symbol of hope, and a force the galaxy could no longer ignore. Humanity had shown its strength, and the universe would never be the same.